crowd that doesn't, some people don't speak English, we've got the interpreters here. Thank you so much. If I speak too quickly, just raise your hand. That's a simple way to let me know to slow down. I'm very excited to be here. I've spent the week in Rio with all the Startup Weekend organizers from around the world. Super exciting place. You can feel the energy. I'm excited. So 3 days ago, I looked like this. And they said, you're speaking at this event, you can't look like that. So yesterday, I went a couple blocks over here and got the straight razor treatment from this very nice man. And right when I was doing it, the guy that came with me, at this moment, he said, remember, he can slit your throat. So I learned, to trust people. So today I want to tell you a story. Sure, come on up. And the story just has 3 parts to it. I think where I was in 2007 is where a lot of people in this room are right now. That's not saying that you're behind where we were, but I think I was just in this very unique situation that I think is a good segue. So, a start. So I lived in the United States, specifically I lived in this little place called Colorado, in the middle of it. And a little beautiful place called Boulder, which is kind of like Rio, in that it's right on some mountains, and people really like the outdoors. People are incredibly fit and good looking. That was more of a Rio joke. It's about 100,000 people though, right? It's not a hotbed for startups. That's like 6 blocks here, 6 or 7 blocks here. It's a very small place, but it's a very passionate place of people and technologists. It's the most PhDs per capita of anywhere in the United States. It's just a lot of smart people that like doing what they're doing. It's a place that if you don't ride a bike, you can't get a date. There's a love of outdoors, and that translates to a love of a lot of things. So when I first moved to Boulder, I graduated from college, the top of my class. There was a field of about 8,000 students, and I was #1. And I was really excited about this. And I came to Boulder, and I was waiting for my job offers to come in, and I got 0. And in fact, I applied for 80 jobs, and I got 2 interviews. And those 2 interviews resulted in 0 jobs. And so I fell on my face in Boulder. The start was not very nice. I found myself very isolated, very depressed. And finally somebody said to me, we just had this email from this really crazy guy. He wants a full website for $500. Can you do that? And I thought to myself, somebody would pay $500 for a website? And so I jumped on it. And then, of course, they told all their friends, and they told all their friends. And pretty soon, I had started a company, accidentally. And I had started a company that I really wasn't passionate about. I started a company, I had 5 employees, we had an office, we had a culture, we had dogs running around, we had everything. But I hated it. And I hated what we became. And I think this is an important part of the story, is because I failed really, really badly. I showed up to work on Monday. One of my employees decided to quit. One of my employees decided to embezzle some money. One of my employees decided if they're gone, I'm gone. And the final employee was looking at me going, oh, hell no. So in 1 week, my successful, I'm doing everything right, young entrepreneur startup went to 0. And I got depressed, and I kind of was looking at who I was and what I had to give to the world. And I took a moment, and I just took a step back. And I started volunteering, and I started to get to know people in the community. And I just tried to give, and I just tried to be a part of anything. So I read, my friend Jared was starting this thing called Techstars with this guy named David Cohen, who I'd never heard of. And does anybody know what Techstars is? A few people. So it's arguably the biggest now seed stage accelerator in the world. They have 9 programs that they operate. They do about 110 deals a year. They've had, I don't even know how many in exits, but they're one of the most successful. It's generally Y Combinator and Techstars are the 2 biggest accelerators you'll hear. So they started down the street for me. And so I walked in to David's office and I said, hi, I'd like to work for you. And he said, well, we don't have a job. And I said, okay, cool, well, I'm a big guy, and if you'd like to move me, you can try, but I will be here, and I'll be here tomorrow, and I'll be here the next day. And he said, well, we need a cameraman. Do you know how to do videography and cameras? And I said, no. Well, I didn't say that out loud. I said, yes, I know how to do that. And I went down to the video camera store, and I bought a really nice camera, and I showed up the next day and started just volunteering and throwing down Techstars. So Boulder is a place where you have lots of coffee shops, and people work out of the coffee shops. They'll sit down for 3 or 4 hours, work on some code, a project, and get to go. And this results in a problem. Here's me in 2007, same haircut, right? But this is the problem. Is in this room, there's 7 people that will go on to lead $1 million startups, and they're working out of a coffee shop, and they don't know each other. So this guy, actually the guy looking over to me, left in the middle, he has a sales team of about 100 people selling the software he's written. So we have these brilliant people just hanging out at a coffee shop, not knowing what each other does. And I saw this, and I thought that we could fix this. So I put up this really, really horrible website and called it Startup Weekend. And it was this was this idea of, can we launch a startup? Can we get together the people in this room, and instead of talking about what we do, actually do what we do, right? Can we try to like actually work together on a low-level project, on a project that might not matter in a month? But I want to know if you're good, I want to know if you're good, and I want to know if you guys work well together. I want to know if everybody in that coffee shop is actually who they say they are online. So the first weekend was held in Boulder, Colorado. We rented out a space above a bike shop. We had 80 people show up, and it was really quite fun. You could feel this wonderful energy in the room. We launched a startup that went nowhere, but the friendships from that moment still are really, really powerful and some of my best friends. It spread. Here's one in Atlanta, and over the first 2 years, we created Startup Weekend. We had 50 events in 2 years, and this was bootstrapped. This was me in my bedroom. I had no office, and this was me not asking anyone permission. I had no support from the government. I raised no money. I just thought that this should happen, and so I went for it. My roommate did the logo, and then we became suddenly this kind of big international hit, which was quite funny because I, was this guy in a bedroom typing, these blog posts with if you saw this website, would you attend this event? Like, it was horrible, right? But the core assumptions that we drove forth really worked well. And that was everyone is welcome. Everyone is valued. And everyone is complicated. And really, if I hear about all sorts of problems in startups, and I keep on going back to these core assumptions as fixing everything. You want to fix gender inequality in tech? Follow this. You want to fix racism in a community? Follow this. Everyone is welcome. It's not the talented, it's not the connected, it's not the privileged. Everyone is welcome. So we had 50 events in our first 2 years, and there's some notable ones. In DC, Washington, D.C., there was a small web development shop that hosted the weekend, and we had almost this many people show up to it. And then on Monday, they were on the front page of the Washington Post business section. It was the Sunday section, and it was by far our biggest press that we'd ever gotten. And from that, they launched their startup. They employ 55 people now in 6 countries, or 6 states in the United States. And it really had a remarkable impact on them. This is a volunteer effort. Nobody asked, nobody gave me permission to do this. Seattle is an interesting story because the people that run Startup Weekend, are you guys here? Mark, anybody from Startup Weekend? Okay, I can tell the real story. No, I'm just kidding. We've got a couple people. So in Seattle, we started the tech community in Seattle almost through this event. We threw an event, 200 people showed up, and those 200 people are still the core people in the Seattle tech community. It got such an engagement and such attention that it actually found the people that now run it, which is kind of the full prophecy of the story. So let me talk a little bit about community. Has anyone here read Startup Communities by Brad Feld? A few people. Did anybody see Brad speak this weekend? A couple people. He got up here and went on a 15-minute rant about dead bodies in the swamp, which I will not do. But this is a fantastic book. In reading it, it's a lot of the stuff that I did in Boulder. Boulder, we just had these down-to-earth, so this is kind of a blueprint of if you guys are asking what should we do next, or what really worked in a small community, or what really worked for us, this is what I do. We had a once monthly meeting called New Tech Meetup. And New Tech Meetup was just, anybody was welcome. The local university bought chips and guacamole for everybody, and a Coke. And we'd come and 6 companies would just talk and say, here's where we're at. It wasn't a pitch for venture capital, it wasn't anything amazing. It was just, here's where we're at, we're doing really well, or we're really having problems with this, and people looking for jobs would stand up and be like, hey, I'm looking for a job, and people that were offering jobs would say the same. It was really low level, it was really simple, and it worked amazingly well. Everyone was welcome, everyone was valued. About the time that New Text turned 2, we realized that the tech community was really turning into something different, and how big it was. So we started throwing this thing called Ignite. Does Rio have an Ignite? Okay, so it's a public speaking event of sorts. Everyone's given 5 minutes on stage, 20 slides that auto-advance after 15 seconds. So you get up and people share their geeky passion in 5 minutes. And you have 14 people do that. It's a pretty fun night. It's a pretty beer-filled night. We have, in Boulder, the largest Ignite in the world. It's every other month with 800 to 1,600 people, which is a great kind of segue drug to get people into the tech community, because they see all these really, really passionate, wonderful people. We had, last week, a talk become the most watched Ignite talk of all time. I host this thing called TEDx Boulder. It's the TEDx Rio host here. So you guys have an amazing TEDx Rio event. I've seen pictures and it looks absolutely phenomenal. But we put on TEDx Boulder, and it's now the largest TEDx in the world. It's 2,200 people. And when I say 2,200 people, I mean out of a town of 100,000 people. So when we're throwing these events, 2% of the town is showing up, which is just a remarkable thing to do. It's kind of like when you guys are going to have the big events coming up, right? You're going to have this critical mass of people. Only everybody will be able to do it. And then this funny thing happened, and I kind of hate to say the tipping point, but we started just kind of like throwing up these events on blogs. So I decided brilliantly to call something Startup Week and not Startup Weekend. And then it was front page news for all the business journals, and all the venture capitalists were suddenly very excited and interested in this. We had 55 events in 5 days. It's 11 a day. All were free. All were volunteer run. There was no central leadership and no organizational structure. Does that scare anybody? Right? It's like having this, but just like, okay, we're going to meet at a bar to do usability. We're going to meet at, and we did it. And Boulder, the community, everybody knew enough people that it worked, and it worked out really well. Our core values really proved out. Startup Digest is another thing we did really, really well in Boulder. Do you guys have Startup Digest? Okay, so we have the curator down here. So we treated community as something of a sport. We treated community as something of something everybody plays. And I'm going to get to that later. I've got something new that I'm going to kind of announce here, launch here, or work out. And it might work, and it might not. Who knows? One thing we've done through all these tech events is we've pushed 3.8 million video views. And I do this thing, which I suggest, and I'm going to challenge some of the audience to take this forth. Failure is fine, right? If you're in startups and you don't think failure is an option that's not a negative one, you should probably find another industry. Startups are hard. You're going to fail a lot. Get over it. So I got tired. Like when I sold my company, I had this big fancy dinner with all the investors and all the people that helped me out. And we had bottles of champagne and stuff like that. And it was great, but I got lucky, right? I didn't really, that's not the full story. And if you fail, if you did, I could have done the same exact things and failed, right? I got lucky. I put myself in a position where I could succeed, but at the end of the day, it's not a skill game. So I started these things called non-acquisition dinners, where if you're a startup and you gave it a go and you involved the community and you really tried and you didn't work out, I took you out to that acquisition dinner, but we celebrated that you gave it a shot. So I'm going to challenge you guys here to throw non-acquisition dinners for your friends, for the people in your community. They give it a go, and things don't work out. So this is the new thing that I'm going to try out for you guys, and I hope it works. I haven't actually spoken about this at all. I think we're in this very interesting time in startups. In the States, we joke a lot about the bubble and the Series A crunch and all of these, the funding's happened, everything should be beautiful, yet nobody's happy. The startups should be bumping out. We should have a YouTube every month, right? And really, you're seeing success about a year apart. You'll have an Instagram, and you'll have when Instagram exited, they had 14 employees, 12 employees. So you're seeing just a much different style of tech right now. This is the map of where Startup Weekend has been. These are all the places in the world where Startup Weekend has had an event. I think tech is fundamentally changing, and I think a lot of people in this room are helping drive that. For Startup Weekend, there's been over 1,000 weekends in 478 cities with over 100,000 participants. And these participants are all being taught that you don't have to ask permission, that you can work with really talented people for no money to create beautiful things. They're not being taught that you need to create a business plan. They're not being taught that you need to go out and raise venture capital day one. They're not taught that venture capital is a metric of success. It's part of the game. Startup Weekend's doing a lot, and I think it's really important where they're taking it. And I'm no longer involved in the company, and the team that's running it is absolutely phenomenal. Here's a map of where Startup Weekend is going in the next year. This amazing, absolutely amazing. This is a nonprofit, right? This is people that love the spirit of the game of startups and entrepreneurship. And let's bring this back to the first thing that I started with. This all started with me failing and people being all right with that. When I walked into David Cohen's office and I said, hey, I just failed a startup, he said, you're welcome, right? Please be involved in the community. Don't give up, don't go away. None of this would happen. I would not be here if I did not fail. So I'm gonna try to keep hitting on that one a little bit. Techstars started. I was the first employee. It's now a giant success. It's doing really, really good things for the world. There's 9 programs. There's a ton of stuff going on. But what did we fail at? Right? What did Startup Weekend fail at? What did Techstars fail at? It's an honest question, right? Successes have failures. You just acted quickly to fix them. I think the main thing that we failed at is not identifying this thing called startup leagues. So imagine if we were to go across the street to the park and kick around the football. I can say football, right? I don't mean American football, I mean real football. Okay. Is it soccer here? You call it soccer? No. No, football. I'm gonna go football. It's football, okay. So if we were to kick around the football in the park, we would all be playing the sport of football, right? But if I were to go to Nou Camp in Barcelona and get on the pitch there with Ronaldo and Messi, it would be a much different game. I'd be playing football, but doing it horribly. It's the same sport, right? Well, in startups, if I'm a hacker at a coffee shop, or if I'm in a venture capital led thing, or if I'm with Startup Brazil, this like amazingly led effort, we're all doing startups. We're all on that pitch. We're all playing the beautiful game. We're just doing it in remarkably different ways. So I came up with this concept called startup leagues, and that there is a league for startups. And none are right and none are wrong, but there are leagues. It starts with passion plays. The people that come to you, and their main goal is to just work on something interesting. And if they pay rent with that, they're really happy, right? They work out of a coffee shop. This is the side project. This is their passion, right? And if somebody comes to you as a passion play, we shouldn't say, that's wrong, you're not raising venture capital, or that's wrong, you're not changing the world. We should say, that's an awesome league. You should try to win it. The next league is regionalism. So I want to do something for Rio. I want to do something for Boulder. I want to do something for a specific place. I want to open up a car dealership. I want to open up a coffee shop. Really, the scale of it isn't unbelievable. But it'll provide a few people with jobs, and it'll make everybody's life a lot better. The third one is market leaders. They're attacking something. They want to be the best, perhaps, cell phone provider, or form generator, or C++ library, or whatever. But there's a market that they want to conquer. Market changers, they want to go in and attack the big boy. They want to go into something that's already defined and take over. The final one being world plays. People that want to be like Facebook and Google and Yahoo, and they're not going to sell, and they're going to be that big force. Now, if a first-time entrepreneur comes up to you and says, I want to do a world play, I'm probably not going to believe them. If a first-time entrepreneur comes up to me and says, I want to start an enterprise startup, I'm probably not going to believe them. But it's important that they're identified in leagues. I'm sure there's a ton of holes in this philosophy, but I like the idea that you can start as a passion play and end up taking over a market play, or start as a market leader and take a market enter and go to a market leader. So when somebody comes to you in a startup and they're saying, I really want to do MySpace, but just for people in Rio that go to this club, right? What they're really saying is, I want to be a passion play startup. And that's awesome, right? I mean, we shouldn't get down on them for that. And if somebody's crazy enough to say, I want to be a world changer, we should probably also realize that they might be crazy enough to achieve that. And that should be celebrated as well. So today we have Startup Brazil. You guys are watching. I mean, there's 9 accelerators here, which is just amazing to me. There's a ton of energy in this room. There's a ton of very important people in this room. I'm very honored to be here. And this is something that's, I don't know how it'll play out, right? Because I never saw this, right? Nobody asked permission, or nobody gave permission for me to do what I did. So now you guys have this great network of permission, right? You guys are running. You guys are going forth with vigor, and it's awesome. It's so cool to see, and I'm so excited to hear from the startups today. I think I'm going to wrap up, and we're going to open up to question and answers, or good questions and bad answers. But I want to leave you with 3 challenges, and I really want every one of you to do all 3 of these. 1, have a humble pride. Give as much as you can. Take meetings. Be involved with the people that aren't important yet, that aren't achieved, that don't have track records yet. Really give back. Host coffees, host dinners, throw out non-acquisition dinners. Throw out events that you don't make money from. Just give. And as much as you give, you get back in the long run. I'm a firm believer in that. And communities that do that are amazing. The second thing is to write. I became somewhat well known because I just was the only one in the room to write. So who here has a personal blog or a company blog? A couple people, right? The best thing I ever did professionally was have a personal blog. By far, hands down, the best thing. I gave a similar bit of advice in Singapore, and the next speaker came up and said, pardon me, pardon the last speaker, but our government can kill us for what we say. So maybe, not giving, you should give that advice. But I think that you have a huge opportunity, right? You just saw something hopefully new and different. You're with a bunch of people that are new and different. And I'm guessing maybe 3 of you will actually write about it, right? This time and place will never be here again, and a very small fraction of you will actually try to capture that. If you are one of them, the rest of you are going to look at that. It's a great way to hack. It's a great way to give back. So my challenge to you is to write. Well, I mean, GECs this week, write about it. Don't just attend it and say I liked some parts and I didn't like some parts. Actually write about it. The third part is experiment. And this is, if you're doing something like Startup Brazil, you can say it's an experiment. And you're gonna continuously test throughout the life of Startup Brazil. And all the incubators you're going to launch, you're gonna see what happens, and then you're gonna do stuff. Don't ever get afraid to do this. And if you ever hit a point where you're discouraged about that, hack in some different things. Build some hardware, build a website, start a garden, do some painting, just hack. Just get out there and do it. And those are my 3 things. Any questions? In the back.
So microphone?
Do you want to come up here?
I will try to shout.
Okay.
So you created the startup weekend,
Yeah.
and as far as I'm concerned, it was first experience like that offered to communities, and now there are multiple competing initiatives.
Yeah.
How do you see that? Like, do you go out with the guys who create Startup Life or Startup Experience? Or?
Cool. So I asked the question was, I created Startup Weekend, which seemed to be the first of its kind. Now there's a lot of copycats. How do I do that? Is that about right?
Yes.
Cool.
Exactly.
When we started Startup Weekend, there was nothing new, right? We had bar camps, we had super happy dev house, we had all these things. We pieced it together in a place where it was new. It was exciting. It was the right thing, the right time, the right place. There's 100 or so, do a startup in a weekend or do a short thing, and that's awesome, right? Because the end goal of that, or the end mission of Startup Weekend, is to get more people excited about what entrepreneurship actually is. So if there's 1,000 copies of it, I'm the proudest person ever.
Thank you.
Yeah. And there's a mic going around here, so if you have a question. More questions?
Why is your expectations to Startup Weekend in Brazil?
So, excuse me. My expectations for Startup Weekend and Startup Brazil is just a lot of experimentation, right? And if the goal of Startup Weekend for me has always been community, right? It's never been about raising money or having world-changing startups. It's always been about meeting really good people and working with them for years. The problem with the coffee shop, right? That's my goal of Startup Weekend. So if I mean, there's 2 or 3 Startup Weekends this weekend in Brazil. There's one in Santiago. I mean, the whole region is having a lot of Startup Weekends, and they're really fun to travel to, by the way. They're really fun to go to for the weekend if you want to meet every hacker in an area. Yeah, just get out there and hopefully build the strongest community in the world. I think communities are incredibly dangerous in a good way. They're very, very powerful. Yeah. Yeah.
So you've talked to us about Boulder, which is like a small city, much smaller than Rio. So can you tell us a bit about challenges that like a larger city can have, like, and how to overcome the challenges of being like big, as like Rio, like 7 million people, and building a startup community around it, and especially like when there are not many places where entrepreneurs can go for free at this point.
So pretend you're brand new to the community. How do you meet you? Right? How do you meet every single person in this room? If I'm brand new to Rio, what do I do? Yell it out. What do I do? Okay, that's a problem. Maybe it's just a cultural thing. You don't like yelling out things on cue, but if I can't Google, a co-working space or an event or whatever, so throw events, right? We have the New Tech Meetup, which is this great thing. Use meetup.com. Nothing amazing tech-wise. We just made it accessible. If you Googled, how do I get involved in the Boulder tech scene, there's 50 different articles, right, of people that took the courage to write about it. Have events that are accessible, that stick to the core values of everybody's welcome, everybody's valued, everyone's complicated. I would really just throw events, and really, if you have a company that is successful, have them host it. And it could be a 30-person meetup, and that's fantastic. But keep up with those. Another one is, and this one's really hard, is to really try to ditch the ego. Really try to remove yourself from being, nobody runs the community. Everyone is a part of it, right? There's nobody that controls it, nobody speaks for it. Everybody's just kind of this, giving person that's helping out, that runs it. And that's key. Is that all right?